Hi everybody, this is Eric from the African Homestead. Welcome to the first edition of First Q&A. First Q&A is where I answer your questions the first day of every month. As long as you keep asking questions, I'm going to keep answering them. Now I got to be honest, maybe I went a little bit overboard, but I tried to take things seriously. And so I spent hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars putting together a studio quality lighting system to give you the best user experience. So without any further delay, I've got my iced coffee, I have your questions, let's go to it. Now these questions are in no particular order except the order that they were asked. So the first question comes from 0710KAM08. That's a beautiful name, or handsome name, I'm not sure which. But the question was, what is your source of income? Something that's been mentioned on one or two other channels in reference to my family, and also I think I've mentioned it in the comments section as I'm answering questions, is my family and I are here in Liberia as missionaries. And so we get our financial support from supporters who just give sacrificially every month to support our work here. And so every month we have dedicated friends, family, and churches who send money to our missions organization to support us. Now one of the goals of the homestead that we're establishing up country is that it will be completely self-sustaining in that we'll be able to provide our own food, we'll be able to sell some of the produce and products in order to run the farm, to run the homestead. And so our supporters will be sending money to support us personally and to support the mission work we're doing, but the development work, the community development work that we'll be doing at the same time, our intention is that we're going to be able to have that to be self-reliant, self-sustainable. And not only is our hope for that farm, that homestead, to be self-sustainable, but also to have excess. We're going to be able to use the excess produce to be able to help people in need. We're also planning to set it up as a model farm to where we can hold workshops and we can do training. And so the plan is that we'll be doing training on site. We'll have a facility where people can come and stay and be able to learn the various practices that we'll be teaching. One is called Farming God's Way, and I actually have a video coming out that talks about that. I'll try to put the link here or here. And the other approach that we're going to be using is permaculture design. It's something I'm really excited about. In everything that I've been learning about permaculture, it seems to fit very well with the farming culture of Liberia. The next question is from Mickey over at Inwood Eden. Hi Mickey. What is your soil like? And what kind of native vegetation are the best bioaccumulators there? And then he puts in parentheses for biomass and supporting life, pollinators, etc. That's a great question. Hey Siri, what's a bioaccumulator? I'm just kidding. But Mickey, correct me if I'm wrong, a bioaccumulator I think is the same as what's referred to as a dynamic accumulator in permaculture. And if it is, that is certain plants that either pull trace nutrients and minerals and other things from deep in the soil. These are deep-rooted plants. Pull them from the soil, and then when you do a chop and drop or when the leaves drop, some of those nutrients that are not necessarily on the surface of the soil then are basically recharging. Probably one of the most common examples of a dynamic accumulator are nitrogen-fixing plants, which we do have some of those here in Liberia. They're not really known to be nitrogen fixing by people here, but something that I learned that was really invaluable. A guy I mentioned before on the channel, John Keisner, with his YouTube channel is called The Natural Farmer. He did an episode on how to identify nitrogen fixing trees. And just by looking at the leaf structure, looking at what kind of seeds they make, and then also if you find some small ones, some saplings, pulling them up and looking for nodules on the roots, you're able to identify nitrogen fixing trees without knowing the name of the tree. Based on that, I've been able to identify that we do have some nitrogen fixing trees In Liberia, we do have some on the land, so that's good to see. And of course, I do plan on planting nitrogen-fixing plants like cowpeas and other legumes. Peanuts are very commonly grown here, generally as a second season crop. As far as the soil goes, we have a few different types. We have some areas that would be called a savanna type area that's just flat, grassy, and those are commonly very sandy soil. But most of the country is made up of what's called a laterite soil. It's a red soil that generally contains high amounts of iron oxide. It can also contain aluminum oxide, and it's good for building roads. It's good for making mud bricks to build houses, but it can be challenging to use in gardens and to use on the farm. Fortunately, there are practices, traditional practices and permaculture practices that can restore and rebuild the soil. Typical Liberian agriculture is to go into a forested area that hasn't been farmed for years, possibly never farmed before, and just slash and burn. Cut the trees down, burn all the vegetation, and what that does for them is it takes care of a weed problem, it takes care of an insect problem. All the pests are killed off. And so for most of a season, they're able to grow very well. Unfortunately, that type of farming practice exposes the soil to the sun and to the rain. And so quickly, this rich layer of soil that's on the rainforest floor is quickly depleted, quickly leached out, and after 2 seasons, the place is just left to regrow, and they slash and burn another section of land. Sometimes these sections can be anywhere from a few acres. I've even seen some that are close to 100 acres of land. The first season they usually grow rice and cassava. Sometimes they'll grow other vegetables like pumpkin. The laterite soil is a reddish soil. It's very well drained. Because we're in the tropics, the soil is very acidic. It can range anywhere from 3 to 5 pH. What I have in my garden is about 5 pH. It's probably more common to find the soil pH in the 4 to 5 range. 3 is a lot more rare. And the next question is from Rob Donaldson. And thanks for the generous comments. And he asked, did you say you were about to move to a new homestead? And the answer to that is yes, we're getting ready to move to a new homestead. And by new homestead, I mean jungle. There is nothing there but jungle. There is some of the land that's been cleared previously for farming, where they're growing some cassava. They've grown some peanuts recently. There's a current pineapple farm there. But other than that, it's old growth rainforest. It's just jungle. And we're going to try to preserve as much of that as possible and actually utilize some of the shade grown techniques to grow certain things that will thrive in that environment and not disturb these old growth rainforest trees. Rob's next question is, have you filmed what it looks like? I filmed a little bit of what it looks like, just some clips here and there that you see in the intro video to the channel, but I do have an upcoming video where I talk a little bit about where we're needing to put in a road. So you'll see some of the footage of the jungle and the stream that we have to build a bridge across, and you'll see a little bit of footage of what the village life is like. Rob's next question is are there structures already on the property? And the answer to that is no. There's nothing on the property yet. And his final question is, how many acres is the property? The property has not been surveyed yet, but from my rough calculations, it's going to be around 25 acres. When we went to the town and told them what we wanted to do as far as agricultural development and use it as a model farm and training, I said we need some land that is flat or gently sloping. I said I want access to a stream, and I also asked for some swampland, because swampland farming is very common during the dry season here. As that water recedes, the rich soil in the swamp is great for growing a variety of things. What they came back with is some land that was gently sloping. There is a stream that borders 3 sides of the property and cuts through one corner, so we have access to that running water. And there's a swamp nearby. Unfortunately, when we did a cutting of the perimeter of the property, we didn't get into the swamp. But honestly, if we want to go and do some development in the swamp, it's not going to be a problem for them because it is beneficial to the community, beneficial to the people in the area. That as we learn and teach, everybody will benefit. And so I don't think that's going to be a problem, but the swamp is not a priority. The other opportunity we would have in the swamp area is to be able to raise fish. And so catfish, there's an African catfish that's common here that can thrive in that type of a swamp environment, a swamp pond environment. And then also tilapia do very well here in water that is not moving. The next question is from Nate at Tiny Hilltop Food Forest. And it's basically asked, where do you get your seeds? I've mentioned this in a couple earlier videos, but you know, as time goes on, things change. But there are two primary sources for my seeds. One place we get our seeds is from an organization called ECHO. It's a nonprofit Christian mission based in Florida, and their primary mission is to fight hunger by equipping farmers, smallholders, to be successful in their farming efforts. And so they provide us with trial packets of seeds. And so these are seeds that we can use to see, okay, can it grow? It's not a large quantity of seed. I'm able to get 10 packs of seeds free every year. And so I was able to get some seeds. I have some corn, a hybrid corn that was developed in Hawaii that's supposed to do well in the tropics. I have a couple different varieties of papaya that I'm currently growing, and they're doing very well. There's just a variety of different seeds that are designed to do well in the tropics. That is where most developing countries are, and that is also where there are major hunger issues and nutrition issues. A great organization. I'll leave a link for their website below. The second place that I get my seeds, and this is the first time dealing with them this year, is called Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. And the reason I selected them is because most of their seeds are targeted to those southern climates, subtropical climates. And so I stand the best chance of finding seeds with them that will stand the heat of the tropics, will stand the humidity, will withstand the disease pressure, withstand the pests, all of those kinds of things. And with the seeds I got from them, I got mixed results. I am very encouraged by what I'm getting, so I highly recommend Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. I'm not an affiliate with them, I'm not sponsored by them, but so far my experience with their company is very good. The third source of seeds are going to be locally. There are a couple of different seed companies in Liberia that sell seeds that are proven to work in this environment, in this soil. And also the Ministry of Agriculture provides seeds to farmers free of charge. And so I haven't tapped that yet, but that's something that I do want to do. Part of the goal of what we're doing here is to be successful. And so we want to grow things that we know will grow. And we want to be able to have high production with small problems. And so using local seed that are true and tested over the years will help that. Of course, we want to see what kind of methods that we can implement to not only have success with local seeds, but also really improve upon how they produce here in Liberia. And so implementing things like mulching, compost, those types of things will help not only a good seed do well, but even do better than what's previously been done in Liberia. The next question is from Jake and Becky over at White House on the Hill. Hey guys, they ask, can we hear about your missionary work? What is a typical day like with that part of your life? Well, a typical day is intending to do lots of different things, intending to do great things, intending to be very productive, and then life happens. And living in Africa, you know, I tell people that living here is work. And what I mean by that is sometimes you wake up and there's no electricity. Sometimes in the middle of the day, there's no water. Sometimes we get sick with malaria, as I was last week. Oftentimes, the car breaks down. People get sick. Challenges happen. There are different emergencies and crises that we deal with. People show up at our house where there's been a death in their family. And so the typical day is you intend to do a lot of things and you make lots of plans and quite often you don't end up doing what you planned on doing. And so it's one where for a person like me who likes to have rhythm, I just feel off balance a lot. It's something that is definitely challenging. I don't know if I'll ever get used to it, but it's life here. But you know what I found is interesting is as I reflect back on, there's been some conversations recently about what is homesteading. And when I hear people talk about homesteading, the challenges they face are not unlike the challenges I face. When you're trying to have a self-reliant, self-sustainable lifestyle, you face the same kind of challenges of things breaking and things not working and things not going as planned. And I think that the average American life is really insulated against those things. When you're living maybe on grid, when you're living in the city, when you're living with a job that pays you reliably every couple of weeks or once a month, when you have things that are just a lot more predictable, you get used to that just being normal. And when you go out from the normal, and whether you go to Africa to become a missionary, or you go off-grid homesteading, or even on-grid homesteading, when you become self-reliant and maybe totally reliant upon God, you find that life is unpredictable, and you spend a lot of time off balance trying to get steady again, and not always being successful at that. And so what does my daily life look like? It's all of those things. Lots of plans, seems like few accomplishments, lots of work, lots of sweat and dirt, and that's what my daily life looks like. Your first question is that you would like to hear more about our missionary work. I first came to Liberia back in 2007 for a 2-week short-term mission trip, and then came back again with a group to renovate a building in 2010 and set up a library. In 2011, I came with my family to do something called Business as Missions. That's where you run a for-profit business and then use those profits to help start churches, to help build clinics, build schools, do leadership training, those types of things. We were able to make a go at the business and cash flow and be completely self-supporting. But after about 18 months, and due to a very challenging business climate, we decided to close that business and go back to the U.S., raise the necessary financial support to come back as more traditional missionaries. We have a few different areas that we focus on. For me, I do pastor training, and so once a week, every Saturday, I drive about 2.5 hours up country and spend anywhere from 3 to 5 hours teaching pastors who minister in bush churches, village churches. Some of them are starting new churches, and maybe it's just 3, 4, or 5 people in their church, and they're meeting once or twice a week to do Bible study and prayer and sing some songs together. And others have established churches with 40, 50, 60 people in it. But these are, well, I guess you call them bivocational pastors. A lot of them are not paid for the work they do. They also farm, or they have other work that they do for their income, and then they serve their church really 7 days a week as they're doing their work. They're very hardworking, dedicated people. And so a lot of them don't have solid theological training, and so that's one of the things I do with this pastor training. There's a program called the Timothy Initiative that's focused on discipleship and planting, starting new churches. And that's the curriculum I'm teaching. And it takes about 2.5 years to go through. Again, meeting every Saturday, 12 months out of the year, and spending anywhere from 3 to 5, sometimes 6 hours on a Saturday. The other ministry that I'm doing is related to the homesteading. We're going to be moving from the capital city of about 1.5 million people to just outside the edge of a village town where there's about 1,000 people living. And we're going to be homesteading from scratch, starting with nothing, and building a simple mission base there. So we're going to have a house and a garage and a schoolroom, and hopefully in the next couple of years we're going to be able to build a training center with a small guest house so that we can have anywhere, whatever length of training that we want. And so it can be day training, it could be 3-day workshops, week-long seminars, again, talking about training people in permaculture and this technique called farming God's way, and just sharing everything that we're learning. And so this development work that we're doing in the interior is to help the people be self-sustaining. In Liberia, as in other African countries, there is a history of when missionaries came in and started churches. They came with lots of money. And in a way, these new churches got very dependent upon foreign funds. And that kind of dependency, whether it's foreign funds for churches or foreign funds from non-governmental organizations or foreign governments, these dependencies are not healthy and they're not helping. And we are finding the long-term effect of being dependent upon foreign funds is stifling growth. It's stifling development. It's stifling innovation among the local people. And so we're coming in a way that they won't become dependent upon us. Now, of course, there will be times when we need to pull money out of our pocket and help someone that's in a crisis. There will be times where we need to pull food out of our garden and help somebody who is starving. I mean, that's a fact. There are times when we're going to need to, load people up in the car and take an emergency run to the hospital. That's a fact. It will happen. But what we don't want to do is to build this long-term dependency. And so one of the ways we're doing that is with this development project, with agriculture and with livestock. We're raising rabbits, learning not only how to raise them successfully, but how to butcher them and then how to cook them. And we're going to be teaching these things. The same thing with goats, as I mentioned in an earlier video. Nobody milks goats in Liberia. So we have a fantastic opportunity to teach that skill and to show the benefits of goat's milk. Another development opportunity, as I mentioned before, is culturally the way to farm is slash and burn. After a couple of seasons, move on to a new plot of land to slash and burn again, leaving the other one nutritionally depleted and essentially a wasteland that will grow up and over the years recover, only to be slashed and burned again. And so bringing in these techniques of farming God's way, permaculture design, it will allow us to show people you can farm and garden the same plot of land year after year. You can show and demonstrate that the soil improves and you have fewer pests and you have fewer weeds and you have better crops with more production. And so the ministry we're doing here is a holistic ministry. It's not just sharing the gospel or just starting new churches or just training pastors, but in addition to that, it's teaching skills. It's developing people's livelihoods so that they are not dependent upon us and they're not dependent upon foreign governments, they're not dependent upon foreign organizations, foreign money. They can be self-reliant and pay their pastors with the produce that they're grown in their own fields. And my wife has a couple of different ministries that she works with. One is working with adult women to help develop skills. And so they are making purses and making bags with local fabric. It's called lapa fabric. It's this very bright and beautiful African fabric. They are also making necklaces. My wife actually developed a process to make beads out of this lapa fabric and has really perfected that. I'm so proud of her at what she's accomplished. And so she's teaching the women how to make these necklaces, and we're able to sell those locally. We're also able to send those with people to sell in the US and send the money back. And so these women are able to produce a product, market it, sell it, and reap the benefits from it. And not only is it supporting them, but it's also supporting the ministry that we're doing. My wife's other ministry is helping families in crisis, and that's really a very diverse term. And so it can range anywhere from helping a new mother that had twins or triplets, which is incredibly common in Liberia, but needing to help her because she's not producing enough milk. And so we can help her nutritionally. We can also help with formula supplement, which generally is prohibitively expensive for the average Liberian, and helping in other ways to encourage them. It also could be working with families who recently lost a mother in childbirth. That also is very common. Liberia is among the highest in the world with maternal mortality. And so working with those families to get them through that crisis before they make lifelong decisions that affect that child or children. Quite often, there are agencies here, some of them predatory, who try to take the children into orphanages and then later try to have them adopted internationally. So I am pro-adoption. I have 3 adopted children, and it's something that when necessary, I totally support international adoption. But also the fact is that many of these children that lose their mom in childbirth or shortly after still have families. They still have a father in the home. They still have grandparents. They still have aunts and uncles. They have brothers and sisters who all could help take care of them and raise them. And so we get the families through the crisis of that death in the family and give them time to think about what is best for the child and the child's future before making that all-important decision of whether or not to have them go to an orphanage to be adopted internationally. So that's just kind of the highlights of what we do as missionaries, but honestly it's a lot more than that. It's just crazy the things that you get into. Maybe I'll make a video in the future that talks about how I ended up working in an Ebola treatment unit and carrying people who were sick with Ebola into the ETU. But that's a whole nother video. And the last question comes from Gretchen Inkumsah. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And she actually missed the cutoff, but she was so nice in her note that I decided to include it. And she said that she heard about our channel from Art and Bri. So Art and Bri, thank you very much for that mention. And she mentions that her family is from Ghana, and so she's super interested in what we're doing and very excited about it. So her question is, she would like to know more about the internet in rural areas. And that's a great question. And the internet is interesting here. It's a lot different than what you find in developed countries. My point of reference is the United States, where the internet was first built on the phone dial-up, and then it expanded into broadband either by cable or DSL or the different options there. And also today you can get fairly fast internet with the 4G LTE network. So the internet in Liberia is really unlike most other countries in the world, because during the 14-year Civil War the infrastructure was destroyed. Telephone poles were cut down and used for firewood. The wire was looted and shipped outside the country. Other infrastructure was bombed, burned, just destroyed. So there is no landline telephone system in Liberia to speak of. After the war, we completely rebuilt communication system off cellular networks. And so now we have 4G LTE in the city. Quite interestingly, when I made a recent trip back to the States, I was paying about $10 for 1 gig of data, and where we lived in rural Kansas on our old family farmstead, the speed was not so great. I actually get faster speed here in Liberia, and I pay about $1 a gigabyte. Another thing that's great about how it's set up in Liberia is we are connected to the fiber optic cable that runs along the coast. Connected to that a few years ago. It's been revolutionary to the price of internet, to the speed of internet, and also to the reliability of the internet here. One advantage of having it on a cellular network is you can have an internet hotspot and use it everywhere you have a cell signal. Unfortunately, where we're moving up country is a dead zone. There's one cell company that if we go outside town, stand on a hill on one foot and hold our mouth just right, we'll get a signal that'll make phone calls. So what we're going to have to do is set up our own cell service. We're very blessed by the fact that when we had the company before, they had shipped over an 8-foot diameter satellite dish plus all the equipment to connect to the internet. Since this has been in Liberia for about 8 years, we're going to need to update the equipment, but we're going to use this satellite dish for our own internet service. It's going to be a little more expensive than what we're paying now, but the speed should be good. Unfortunately, most of the rural areas do not have internet and they have limited cell. It just depends. If you're in more populated counties, the investment flows to those counties where they can make money. So the more populated counties have better cellular and internet coverage. The less populated counties, like where I'm going, have a lot more limited options. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for those of you who posted questions in the comments section. I really appreciate it. And I had a big concern that it would just be crickets out there and no one would ask questions, so thank you very much. And first of next month, we'll do this again. As long as there are questions, I'll provide answers. Have a great day. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.